I think you probably lose your money. I'm not sure there's that much flexibility there.
You know, this is Brad. What my question was related to that too, so I just wanted to chime in there. I think one of the things that I would think about, and maybe this is a little too pedantic or esoteric, but you talked about a pendulum swinging, and so this new law, ESSA, has swung the pendulum in a certain direction. When you think about the next swing, what would states want to do now to create a balance as best as possible? So Bob's question is about that, which is that one of the big swings back was kind of undisaggregation of data. The civil rights groups are upset because there may not be enough protection in the law to foster an understanding of equity across the system, right? So then you have a state that opts out of testing completely, and now they have no ability to kind of to defend how equitable their distribution of excellent education is. I'm being a little bit, do you understand what I'm saying, Jane? So I'm thinking that, you know, when you think about this, to emphasize equity now is the right thing to do because the law is lax in that, and next time you're going to swing too far the other way.
Yeah, I think the thing is, Brad, that your question and your comment sort of has a supposition that there's a long-term view. And we, you know, and I agree with you, but, you know, given our political cycles and a lot of the decision-making that's going on is by people who are either appointed by politicals or are politicals themselves. And, you know, they operate within this short-term kind of cycle. So, you know, on the one hand, too, I want to be careful that I do not say that there are no federal requirements. I mean, all of those subgroups must be tested. They must be results reported by subgroup. The state must intervene when there is a significant difference between a subgroup moving forward and the other groups moving forward. Now the state gets to define exactly what that is, you know, so therein kind of comes the rub. So it's a really good reflection though about these tensions, and as is that Alaska bill and the frustration that people feel about some of the testing. Let's go on to the next one. Stakeholder engagement. This is one of the sort of trade-offs in the bill was, okay, we're going to give a lot of decision-making to states and locals, but this is about returning the decision-making to people in communities and people in the states. This is not about bureaucrats and officials making all the decisions. So several places in the law, it talks about meaningful consultation with stakeholders. Teachers are explicitly listed as our teacher organizations, and many others are listed. But there also is a requirement that this be more than just sort of somebody mentioned a listening tour, that, you know, this is not kind of a drive-by consultation like, oh, thanks for sharing, I'll see you around. There needs to be an ongoing mechanism to give feedback and to look at the activities as they're unfolding and see if they are meeting the purposes of the law, sort of thing. So,
and teachers use this as a way to get into their district, into their state board, into see their legislators. I mean, this is written in the law and it has to be meaningful, and we know it. I mean, not that attitude. And so we'd like to be part of the process. We'd like to share and help. Is that a worthy entry?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that is really, you know, sort of undergirds what we're talking about here, that this is not just kind of an add-on or something you might do, an optional thing. The state must be engaged like this, and there should be, it's an invitation. It's more than an invitation. It's a requirement. So the burden really is on us as stakeholders, as teachers, as people in the community working with students to make this law meet its goals, to get in there and have our voices heard. So I would suggest that you don't wait for an invitation, that you work on what it is you want to say and move forward. And we're going to get to a little bit more of that. Lynn, I stole your idea. This is something that Illinois had suggested in their work, is that the state create a teacher in residence to be there for a year, to be a networker for other teachers, to bring the teacher voice in as all of this unfolds. This is not a simple cut and dried decision like, okay, we're going to invest in teacher leadership, boom, goodbye. What does that mean? Is it working? Are people engaged? What difference does it make? All of that. So I really like that idea.
Jane?
Yeah.
Excuse me, this is Lisa. On that Illinois plan, is that a teacher in resident per district or one at the state level that would coordinate with districts in Illinois?
My understanding is that it was at the state level, but if Lynn is still on, she may want to comment on that.
Yeah, this is Lynn. Illinois made 2 pages of single-spaced recommendations to the state at the listening tours they had, and this was one of them, but we haven't gotten a response from them. So we are putting together some other, another plan and document to be able to get that to them.
You know, I know too that the NEA, apparently, Maddie may know more about this, has, I believe, given grants to some of its state affiliates to develop strategies and all sorts of activities to make their voice heard during the decision making. Maybe somebody else knows a little bit more about what they're up to.
Jane, this is Maddie, and I'm actually about to have an article published around a whole bunch of things that are available, resources from NEA, AFT, and a couple of other folks. So I'll make sure I get that to Lori so she can share that with everybody. It's going to be in ed leadership. It's coming out pretty soon. But NEA does have a number of resources available.
That's fantastic. That's really great. So any thoughts about if you have been less than thrilled with sort of the listening tours or the opportunities that have been presented, any thoughts about how to upgrade that stakeholder engagement, or how you might go about contacting folks at the state level or district level to push a little bit and to find out more and to make suggestions? Let's take a couple of minutes, you write down your thoughts, and then we'll chat a little bit.
Would it be, this is Lisa, would it be possible to have, like we have 3 congressional districts in the state of Nebraska, and have focus group meetings in each of our congressional districts or in different parts of the state where the Nebraska Department of Education has a rep or a couple there, a State Department of Education, people who have maybe made themselves an expert on ESSA, where they meet, go out to the teachers and administrators and have focus meetings where questions can be answered, where guidance can be given, where input can be taken back to the state boards to discuss what are the concerns or questions from different parts of the state. Would that work?
That's a great idea. Absolutely. I think the more that you organize something and put it in front of people, you know, it's sort of like making it easy for them, you know, like I and some of my colleagues want to organize a forum, and we'd like for you to come and speak, and we'd like for you to come and speak, and we'd like for you to come and speak, and this is what we'd like for you to talk about.
Well, I'm glad you said that's a good idea, because I'll mention that to some people in our state capitol who are just getting to learn more about ESSA and who are in leadership roles. So.
Good. I'm glad you brought up the state legislature too, because they can play a critical role. It'll be different in every state.
Right.
And you know the politics in your state. But if some of these things will require changes in state law. For example, if you have a teacher evaluation system, that many states change their laws in order to get the waivers. And now, even though the federal law has changed and the teacher evaluation systems are completely optional, the state laws are still there. So I believe it was a couple of states recently who changed their state law, taking test scores out of the evaluation systems. So their state legislators can play a tremendous role.
Thank you.
Sure.
If no one else has a question, I don't want to take over anything, but is there time for me to ask another quick question, or should I wait till other people have expressed concerns or questions? I think I'll wait.
Lynn, you had put some comments up there and some ideas about suggestions around professional learning as something to talk to the legislator or the state folks about. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, Lynn Gaddis?
Well, I'm just, and I'm talking about that from the Agents for Learning competition that's out there for all teacher leaders. And Illinois, ILSTOI has decided to submit a plan. It's a competition, and there'll be people who will be selected to attend the next level. And our team is coming together. Rebecca's on the conversation also, but we're coming together to write this so that it'll help us, whether we ever get to the next level or not, to be able to create a more organized plan, a little more comprehensive than those lists of things we recommended, so that we can send that off to our state and hopefully get in the door to have conversations. So I'd share that with everybody. It's called Agents for Learning. You can go ahead and search. In fact, I'll try to put the link to it in the chat room. And all the webinars they've done so far, the application on the rubric is all on their site. It's a real good guide on how to write up plans for professional learning that will come through on Title II funding in the future.
Great. I also recommend, when you get together a plan, is to ask for a meeting. That FaceTime, particularly if you have a group of people, can really make a difference. Okay, shall we go on?
Sure.
So what are some of the hard questions that states are going to have to answer? The first one we've talked about a little bit is, what is our accountability system going to look like? The law requires certain indicators, like the test scores by subgroup, high school graduation rate if you're a high school, and proficiency of English learners, their growth in proficiency. But there also is great latitude in how the state weights those metrics in terms of how much will each one of those count? How much weight will it hold? Also, there is a new requirement for what they call a non-academic indicator. And this is something the state will determine. It could be a school climate measure, a school safety measure. One of the organizations that I work with has recommended that it be a measure of equitable distribution of teachers as part of the accountability system. So there'll be a lot of discussion around that. The proposed regulations that came out today, they are over 100 pages long, but they're very important, and we're in a public comment period now. I have a link at the end. My last slide is filled with links, so you can go and take a look at those. And I really encourage you to send in comments. They are required by law to read all comments and to respond to them. So again, it's another opportunity to make your voice heard. Another one, is weighting the metrics. Another one is, what is an effective teacher? States are required to look at the distribution of teachers. It used to be they had to look at the distribution of highly qualified teachers in terms of equity. Now that the highly qualified term is gone, there is a substitute for the term effective teacher, and there is also a prohibition against the federal government defining that. The state must define that. So that's another place where you want to bring it up, you want to make a recommendation. How should the state define an effective teacher? And maybe how shouldn't the state define an effective teacher? Teacher leadership. Yeah.
And that's a really important point. Do you have some thoughts on what people are doing, or what is the current conversation about what that might look like?
That is a good question. I have not actually seen anything yet on that question. What I have seen is states rolling back on their certification requirements because highly qualified is gone. The default now for states is that all the federal law says is all your teachers must be certified. It doesn't say fully certified. It just says certified, except for special education. Special education teachers have to be fully certified. Now, what does all that even mean? If you've ever tried to penetrate the maze of state certification, it is really a challenge, and there are so many euphemistic terms that it's very hard to know what they mean. But I'm concerned about the pressure, the shortages that many states are facing, and this elimination of this highly qualified requirement. It could be that states would define an effective teacher as someone who's certified. I'm not sure how much that would help us, since the law says everybody has to be certified, but that's the kind of circular thinking that you worry about, or the circular sort of policy definitions that you worry about.
This is Maddie. I just want to reiterate how important it is for teachers to make sure that they go on to the website and to give their input. This is, there'll be 60 days of open comments, and the department does read every single comment, and it will affect the final reg significantly, depending on the number of comments and the type of comments they get. But Jane is right. They are all individually read. They are all individually discussed. And it's one of those times when your voice, even though it seems like you're sending something out into the ether and you don't know if it's getting read, I can assure you it is, and it can have an impact.
And I think that's part of this pendulum swing, right? The pendulum has swung now towards teacher voice. If there is not an action that reflects that swing, there's going to be an action in another different direction. So this is the time to do it, right? If you don't want to do it now, then next time around, there's going to be the same idea that teachers are not heard.
That is a really very good point, Brad.
It is. It is. This is the moment. The door really is open.
Yes.
And this is the moment. And I know that many of you, all of you on this call, are teacher leaders yourself. And there is a lot of language in this bill about teacher leadership. INSTOY worked to get it in there, as well as others. And it is all over the place. But the state has to activate it. And the state needs to be pushed to activate it. So that really is an opening. Also, as I mentioned, the teacher evaluation system. I know many of you have very strong feelings about that. And again, that is up for grabs. So I think, as I said earlier, the first thing to really think about is your priorities. Like, if you ruled the world, are you laughing at my cartoon, Brett? I thought that was pretty good too. But if you ruled the world, I mean, from your perspective, I encourage people to think as ESSA as a tool to use to address the challenges that they know need to be addressed. So you start with that. Is it resource inequity? One of those non-academic indicators in the accountability system could be all about resource equity. Is it that there are too many unprepared, inexperienced teachers in high-need schools and the turnover just exacerbates the low performance of the students, et cetera? You know, what is it that really floats your boat, that just gets your juices flowing? And that is the thing to carve a path with this law around how to address with it. What is your message to decision makers? Who are your allies and who are your opponents? It's so important to have allies. I used to work in the Senate. I was on the staff there, and when people would come in to meet with me about their ideas, their suggestions, what they, thought was good, if I met with one person or a representative for one organization, that was one message. But if 15 organizations came in and said, this is what we all want, that makes the decision maker's job a lot easier. Because if the decision maker hears 15 different messages, then they have to decide. And they're going to just pick the one they like, or they're going to, let politics decide, or let some other random factor determine that. Whereas it's very hard for a decision maker to not pick the thing if there's a whole lot of consensus and a whole lot of muscle around a request. So I really encourage you, as you think about your priorities, to think about your allies, both individuals as well as organizations. Who are the opinion makers in your state? Newspapers, op-eds, that sort of thing.
Talk about, Jane, how you would suggest making allies, because sometimes you have different verbiage, sometimes you have just slightly different angles, and yet you're saying the same thing. So how do you suggest us coming together with consensus-driven decision-making, basically, so we all are saying the same thing? Because an ally might appear as opponent first until you understand what they're actually saying and where the common ground is.
Yeah.
So you have suggestions about that?
That's a really good point. I think the other thing, I would add to that is don't block out strange bedfellows. I mean, it's very powerful for you, let's say if you represent a union, to walk in with someone who's considered very, an administrator, and together say, this is what you want. That is a very powerful. I think it really is about communication and, sitting down and talk to people. I'm a big believer in meeting with people I don't agree with and hearing them out. There was a member of Congress who used to say, if we take the time to really talk to each other, I think we agree on about 80% of things. It's that 20% that we spend all our time beating our breasts about and pontificating about. And we don't explore that 80% enough.
And I would also add that it's also about EQ, right? Allowing your own defenses and the baggage you carry into the conversation to not allow yourself to be swayed from getting a greater good.
Definitely.
Jane, before you move on, could you just talk a little bit more about what kinds of allies there are? I mean, you talked about folks that you might think of as opponents, but, so you're a teacher and you've got an issue you want to work on. Where to start even on that? Could you help give some guidance?
Sure. The first thing you want to do is think about your issue. Let's say your issue is there's, I don't know, what's a good issue? I'm not coming up with it. Teacher leadership. You really want your district and your state to have a very clear continuum for teachers that is reflected in its certification system, let's say. So you want to have beginning teachers, mastery teachers, etc. So who are the allies for that? Who is the decision maker going to hear? That's the other thing. You can have the same message delivered by 4 or 5 different people, but it will only be heard by one particular person because the decision maker knows that person, has other affiliations with that person, etc. So you want to broadly think about others who have a stake in this game. One alliance I think we really underutilize is with parents. You know, what is the parent's stake in teacher leadership? Can you articulate that? Why should parents support that? That can be a powerful ally. The other is, you know, what I like to think of as opinion makers, you know, people in the state who are just, you know, very highly regarded and listened to, and maybe they're in real estate or, I don't know, you know. And it's worth doing some homework on the particular decision maker that you were trying to influence. You know, go on the website, learn about that person. Where do they live? Maybe you know their neighbors, you know. I mean, there are all kinds of affiliations that you can uncover by doing some homework. So I think I would approach it that way. Who else has a stake in the game? Or who else should have a stake in the game and doesn't know anything about it? And doesn't realize it's an opportunity for them. Okay. So here's some nice allies. This is a little bit about what you were talking about there, Lori. You know, allies come in all shapes and sizes, individuals, organizations. I'm sure all of you know which organizations in your state are really powerful. Typically, there's 1 or 2 that really get their voices heard regularly, whether it's a union, whether it's the principals organization, the administrators organization, the PTA. Sometimes it's foundations. You know, many states, I believe Advance Illinois is one of the foundations in Illinois that's been very active in education policy. So that's another place to look. Anybody have any thoughts? You want to chat for a minute about allies and who they might be for you, how you might pursue them, or ones that you're working with now?
Jane, I know you're going to not believe this, but there's only 9 minutes left. I thought,
oh my gosh.
I know, maybe if there was a key slide or 2 you wanted to be sure we had, not to fear if we don't get to everything. I think we could have several webinars on policy. We could even do one once a month if we wanted. But so don't fear if you don't get through everything. But if you could maybe hit 1 or 2 of the points you wanted to be sure we heard.
Sure. Thank you, Lori. I appreciate that. Well, I just wanted to talk about common mistakes. I love this slide, this picture too. You know, this is something you hear a lot from people. You know, why would they want to hear from me? I'm just one teacher, or I'm just one parent, or I don't, you know, there's hundreds of me, nobody cares. There are so many examples of the difference one person could make. It's really an erroneous assumption to think that they don't want to hear from you or that you can't make a difference. You know, another one is, I don't know enough. You know, I haven't even read the law. What do I have to say? I don't know enough. You know, the person, I live in a really right-wing state, and you know, everybody is just thinks our whole education system is broken. They wouldn't want to hear from me. They could care less what I have to say. I'm not sure what my message is. I'm not sure what I want to say about this law. And oh, it's so complicated. Let somebody else do it. I'm too busy. I don't have time. These are all mistakes. And when we make these mistakes, we pay for them because other people who think they know a lot and who make the time will go in and deliver their message. And it very well may not be your message. But in the end, these folks have to make a decision. So that's the bottom line, is a decision will get made with your input or without it. So let's have it a better decision with your input. And so the reality is that public officials do want to hear from constituents. Constituents rule. And my experience is that decision makers like to appear knowledgeable. Maybe they don't all want to be knowledgeable, but they certainly want to appear knowledgeable. They want to appear in touch with their constituents. They want to know what's going on. And you make them look good by giving them information, by having the dialogue. You don't have to have all the answers, but you are experts in your field. Look what you do every day. You are the experts. You are not just some constituent. You are the person who will make the difference in terms of whether or not this law meets its goals. You have just, it's so incredibly important, your voice. Laura, you want to tell your story briefly? Do we have time? Can't hear you.
You know, I think we should tell it another time.
Okay.
Because you've got so much going on, and I'm not sure that it fits right now.
Okay, this is just a teaser then. Lori has a great story. And next time we get together, we'll hear it. It's a story about the impact and the difference one person can make.
Okay, all right. You twisted my arm. It's short.
Here we go.
When I was teaching English in North Carolina, I was really frustrated at the North Carolina state writing exam because I was a journalist and I had been in advertising, and it didn't reflect any real kind of writing that one would ever have to do in life. So I wrote to the superintendent, June Atkinson, and I laid out reasons why it wasn't, I didn't think it was good, and I just wanted to recommend them taking a second look at it. And June wrote back and said, do you want to get on a team that's working on rewriting the state test? And so I got on a team. That itself didn't accomplish anything huge for me, but I started getting to know people and being able to get my foot in the door to work on other things. So that was it, and who would have thought June Atkinson wanted to hear from one teacher in Asheville, but she did.
But I also would add, there's a common, Lori did not make a common mistake, which is that she didn't approach someone that never responded and then just gave up. So we have to recognize that there are varying degrees of expertise in policymakers, and some are really good and some are really bad. And if you approach someone and you talk to them and they're not all that good, they don't know how to translate your expertise, right? But if you talk to someone that really does know what they're doing, and I would suggest that June is actually a pretty good chief. She really does know what she's doing. And so she heard that and she said, yeah, hey, I get this. So another common mistake is that, I tried and I hit a brick wall, and so I'm not trying again. Don't do that. Keep going until you find someone who's a smart policymaker that understands the importance of your voice.
I have a saying that is, don't take the first 100 no's for an answer.
Yep.
So, next steps. These are the same questions that are on the form that you have the link to. I hope that you've been thinking about them a little bit as we've been going through, and that you have some thoughts about them. This is a tool for you to use. We're particularly interested in the last one. What can InStoy do to support you? So let's take a minute as we wrap up here, and if you can do a little writing in the chat box or spend a minute filling out your form, and in particular, let us know, what can InStoy do to support you as you move forward? This is going to be going on for a long time, many months, a year.
Jane, one thing, Brad offered some good examples, and Lori and you, of course, and Maddie. I would like to stay in contact with you all, and you have all of our emails, I assume, from registration, and just send out you know, emails with addresses that we can seek more information, or just, I really enjoy this and I've learned a lot. I've had a lot of questions in the past, even after reading reviews of ESS or ESSA. And so I just want to stay in the loop. And I was hoping that you could be the head of this, or Lori, to send out monthly emails, biweekly emails, whatever will help us stay in the loop. I would like to know the direct link to offer opinions to the Department of Education.
Okay, that's coming up. That's my next slide. But yeah, no, that's a great idea.
That is good. And I think that, you know, that's what the Government Affairs Department is here for, right? And if STOIs and finalists are welcome to join the Government Affairs Committee, and that works to create the voice of NSTOI. But I also think that, Jane, I can't quote this correctly, but the whole thing about a group of a few people can change democracy because it's the only group that ever has. What's the
Change the world, Margaret Mead. That's
okay.
The only way the world changes. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're a rowdy band of brothers and sisters, and we can do that.
You know, the other thing I would just refer you to is I do write a weekly blog updating on everything that's happening on ESSA. And do you get the NSTOI newsletter? You don't? Okay.
So let me interject here. Okay, so first of all, if you don't get the NSTOI member news that comes out every other week, you would have gotten one today if you get it. There's a link on that to Jane's blog. You could also write to me and I can show you where to find it on our webpage. But every week I update that, even though the newsletter only goes out every other week. So every week Jane sends me something and I update it, and it's accessible on the webpage. So send me that. I also wanted to take care of a couple of housekeeping things before we say goodbye, because we are out of time. One is, if you want to save your chat, I can save the chat I've got, and I will, but it also includes my private stuff. If you want to save your chat, in the chat box near the bottom where it says to and there's an everyone, over to the right is a little, the word more with a little drop down arrow. And if you click on that, it will give you the option to drag down to save your chat, and it will save it for you on your computer. Also,